Passive voice is often given a bad rap by teachers, by writers, by grammarians, and for good reason. It's often overused, and often it's used incorrectly. But there are some cases, such as this question, where actually passive voice is used properly. So go ahead, pause this video, and try this one yourself first. So this question comes from the new SAT, comes from the writing and their sample questions that they released a few months ago. So let's try this one out. First thing we'll do is we'll read this little section. A subway system is expanded to provide service to a growing suburb. A bike sharing program is adopted to encourage non-motorized transportation. To alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area, stoplight timing is coordinated. Which choice best maintains the sentence pattern already established in the paragraph? So the key to this question lies within the question itself. We need to find the choice that best maintains the sentence pattern already established in the paragraph, and they're referring to the first two sentences. So what do we have here? We've got a noun, right? A subway system. The verb is, in fact, the verb phrase is expanded, and then the completion of the sentence to show what, in this case, is expanded. And notice in the next sentence, we have the same exact thing. We've got a noun, a bike sharing program, and then we have our verb is adopted, and then the completion of the sentence, right? This is adopted to do this. So in our choice, we need to have a noun and then is plus the verb and then the completion of the sentence in order to match the sentence pattern established in the paragraph. So if you look at the original, we don't have that. We have this in what's called an infinitive phrase, to alleviate rush hour traffic jams, blah, blah, blah. Not going to be relevant here. How about B? Coordinating stoplight timing can help alleviate rush hour traffic jams. It doesn't quite match this pattern, right? We've got sort of a noun in the beginning, but we don't have this is plus verb construction. How about C? Stoplight timing is coordinated to alleviate rush hour traffic jams in a congested downtown area. So here we go. We've got our noun, stoplight timing. We've got our is coordinated, and then the completion of the sentence with a to plus the rest of the sentence. So C looks like it matches what's going on in the first two sentences. And in D, we have this prepositional phrase to start. That's not going to match at all what we're looking for. So the best choice, as we saw previously in the beginning part of this video, the best choice here is C. Now, what do I mean by sometimes passive voice is hated for no good reason? Well, first, let's talk about active versus passive voice. So active voice is basically when the action, the subject of the sentence is also the thing doing the action. In other words, it's also what's called the agent. So simple example, I hate the passive voice. Here, I am the subject. Hate is the verb. And notice I am not only the subject of the sentence, I'm what the sentence is about, right? But I am also the thing doing the action. I'm also doing the hating of the passive voice. So this is an active sentence. What's a passive sentence? Well, a passive sentence is actually the title of this video. Let's ignore for a second the sometimes, and let's just kind of focus on this part of the title. Passive voice is hated. So here, what used to be the object in the previous sentence, passive voice, it's the thing that's being hated, is actually the subject. It's what the sentence is about. It's the subject, but notice it's not the agent. The passive voice is not doing the hating. Something or somebody is doing the hating of the passive voice. What this sentence right here is saying is that the passive voice is hated. We don't know by whom, and as we'll talk about in a second, that's kind of the problem. But this is the passive voice. It's a different way of rearranging the active voice, and ultimately what it does is it stresses a different part of the sentence. So if I rewrite it down here, passive voice, or the passive voice is hated. Now, what's missing in the passive voice construction, and this is one of the problems potentially with the passive voice and why it's often discouraged by teachers, is you're missing the agent. You're missing who is doing the action in the sentence, right? When we look at the passive construction here, like, who is hating the passive voice? One way to fix this is to add by, and let's say by me. Notice now my passive voice sentence has everything in the active voice sentence. It's just arranged differently. But number one, the one issue with the passive voice is we have no agent unless we add it, right? Passive voice is hated. Well, it leaves it open. Who's doing the hating unless we say by me or by teachers or by whomever. The second issue with passive voice, and one of the reasons why teachers and writers don't like to use it, is that it's wordy. Generally, as you can see, when we look at these two sentences, The passive voice and the active voice, they're saying the same thing, but passive voice is just simply longer and more annoying to read and to deal with. And, you can get into issues of it, it's not as, what would they call it? It's not as, vivid or interesting of a sentence or direct of a sentence as the active voice. Those are more subjective judgments. And those are, I guess, kind of the point. But ultimately, for our purposes for these tests, for the new SAT, even for the old SAT, part of the issue with passive voice, if there is an issue with it, is that it's simply wordier. But notice in this question, we have choices, in fact, a correct choice, that uses the passive voice. So it's not always wrong. Look what we have. We've got our noun, stoplight timing, is coordinated. We've got our verb phrase right here. And then notice we have no agent in this sentence. We don't know who is doing the coordinating. But in C, the passive voice is used, and it's used correctly, just as I just used it in that sentence right there. Right? So sometimes passive voice is correct. Now, for the purposes of the SAT, you're never really going to have to choose, at least as it seems now for the new SAT, you're never going to have to choose between the active and the passive forms. Just because it's too close, it's not going to be airtight enough to make one choice over the other. But just know that advice that sometimes you're given in your English classes by teachers, by other people, that passive voice is very bad and you should never use it, is not quite the case in real life, even on the SATs. Sure, we prefer the active voice, but sometimes passive voice is fine. And ultimately, the reason why we have to go with C over the other choices, as we saw in the first part, is that it matches the construction. In fact, the first two sentences also have passive voice. Right? Here's our subject, is expanded. We don't know by whom, who did this, who is the agent, but we have our subject, we have our is expanded form, and then here we have our subject, which is a bike sharing program is adopted. Again, we don't know who is doing the adopting, we just know that the bike sharing program is adopted. So because we're using passive voice in the first two sentences, we must use it in our final answer, which leads us to choice C. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll. And you can find the link in the description below the video.